What's up, plant junkies? Jody here for another plant video from plantjunkiecreations.com. So I've had a few people ask me what type of ingredients do I use for specific type plants. So today I thought that I would go over all of the products that I purchase and what plants benefit from these ingredients. All of these ingredients may seem like much, but a little bit goes a long ways, and you can use it all for any type of plant. You just kind of adjust the ratio of what plant you're supporting. All of these ingredients that I use are supporting an epiphytic type plant, which means that they grow on trees in a tropical environment. So most of these ingredients are wood-based and very well draining. Peat Moss by Hoffman is broken down sphagnum moss, which is another ingredient that I use in my chunky mix, but I'll be going over later. This is what peat moss looks like. Peat moss, out of all of the other ingredients I'm going to be showing you, is like the core to holding moisture in a plant. So I would recommend using this for philodendrons, pothos, syngoniums, anthuriums, and you can use it for other plants too, but I would add less because you got to remember this is for moisture loving plants, and if you don't want to water your plants as much, I would add more peat moss to that pot. So another form that peat moss is used for are those seed pellets that you see at Lowe's in little seed starter trays. I call peat moss seed starter. The next finer thing that I use is called Coco Core, and it looks like this. There's two ways of buying it. You can buy it in a bag already separated, or you can buy it in a brick form, compressed. This is from Eco Earth. It's typically used for terrariums, but It's great for gardening too. And what I love about this is it's a sterile product, compressed and dehydrated. So all you do is you'll take a big like food container and place the brick in there, fill it up with water all the way to the top, and you're gonna have to separate it. And then what I'll do is I'll grab another tray because it expands, and fill it, get a long flat one so you can spread it out and dry it out. You can either put a fan on it, or if it's a sunny day, you can lay it out in the sun and mix it, churn it so it can dry, because when you're storing it, you don't want to have moist, anything moist, because that can develop mold and also attract fungus gnats if it's not sealed properly. Okay, so Coco Core. What do I use Coco Core for? I use it in all my mixtures next door to that first ingredient, peat moss. But for the type of plants that I use them for is like your philodendrons, your pothos, your syngoniums, your anthuriums, your Hoyas. What's nice about Coco Core is it holds moisture, but it doesn't hold it as long as peat moss does. So Coco Core is great for Hoyas, really. Like when I'm making a Hoya batch of soil, I definitely add that Coco Core to the pot. And then the next ingredient is coconut husk or coconut chips. So this is the outer shell of the coconut, and what's really nice about this is that it holds moisture, but not for too long. And a lot of roots actually gravitate to these chunks, and it's really great because it's doing what it would be doing in the wild. The roots, the plants, attaching to these chunks. I use this ingredient again for all of my plants, but specifically with the Hoyas, I add more coconut husk because Hoyas really don't like being moist for too long. They do like being rained on, meaning watered on, but they don't like sitting in moisture at all. So with Hoyas, you typically want to water more frequently opposed to your philodendrons, monsteras, and such. This just helps aerate the soil for those for the monsteras and the philodendrons. I'm hoping this makes sense because I'm not really prepared for this. This is just knowledge and stuff that I've learned by picking the ingredients that work for me. So this is Bonsai Jack, which is pine bark, and it looks like this. The reason why I bought this is I was researching a good quality bark that is not super chunky, because like if you buy orchid bark soil from Miracle Grow, I want to say, these bark chunks are large and they don't do the purpose. I feel like they don't serve the purpose for indoor plants. It seems like that bark would be great for decoration or keeping the weeds at bay outside. So the reason why I was turned on to this bonsai chips, pine chips, is because they're finer. And I noticed that it adds to that chunky mix, so the water, it doesn't hold water for too long. It's well draining. And what plants really like this product are Hoyas. So I specifically bought this mainly for my Hoyas. It's kind of pricey, but when I'm taking care of my personal plants, like I just like to give them the best of the best. And pine also has more, I want to say, acidity to it to help with the pH of your Hoyas. The next thing that I use is called tree fern, and it like looks like roots, like crunchy roots. braided together. This is a new product I started using from Fern, from Fernwood. And most of these products that I've been showing you are for like terrarium, for like your lizards, your snakes, your frogs and such. But the reason why I buy these is because they're bagged and they're sealed. And if they're being used for a terrarium animal, then I feel more confident in not putting bacteria and using it for my plants. Tree ferns. So I specifically bought this because I wanted to try it out, and it works really great for anthuriums. When you start getting those exotic anthuriums or those larger philodendrons like your monsteras, your Thai constellations, I could go off. Tree fern is great for that. It holds moisture. Again, it's well draining. It just seems more of that natural environment. So I definitely add this product, and I've noticed that my plants have been doing good. As far as the acidity to this product, I'm really not sure. I haven't had it that long to really like have a good review. The next thing that I use is what I call sphagnum moss. So that peat moss, aka seed starter, this is the broken down version of sphagnum moss, and I'm sure most of y'all know what this is. This is a product from Super Moss. I bought this on Amazon. It's a compressed brick, and so this sphagnum moss, once you get it wet, it starts expanding. So I use this for a lot of my propagations. I also use this for like orchids. I did use this for my main chunky mix for my philodendrons and such back in the day, but I realized that it holds too much moisture when it's all compressed together with peat moss. So I just leave the sphagnum moss for propagations. It's really great for propagating Hoyas if you combine some of this chunky mix and you add, when you see me list sphagnum moss, it's most likely going to be for propagations. Because sometimes I'll sell a Hoya plant that I propagated in terracotta with a chunky mix and I add this, and those plants that are first starting out, since this holds moisture, the roots start leaning towards the sphagnum moss, and you'll see roots like embedded in this moss. So it's just really great for root development. It's great if you have a very airy mix and you add the sphagnum. This is the key to like an airy mix. And I know that doesn't make sense, but if you have sphagnum moss and peat moss together, it's gonna keep this really, really drenched and eventually turn like peat moss. If you have sphagnum moss with Coco Core and tree fern or pine bark or Coco Core, like less Coco Core, again, Coco Core holds a bit of moisture, so you'll want to use coconut husk with sphagnum peat moss together more so. So just know that sphagnum moss is great for propagations. It's also great for holding that moisture. So keep that in mind. Now the next thing I use is perlite. So this isn't the exact perlite that I use. I was short-handed, so I bought a bag off Amazon. But I typically will buy a very, very large bag because I use perlite for everything. Perlite looks like this. It's like volcanic airy matter that holds moisture, but also develops little air pockets to help aerate your soil. So perlite is great for propagations. Again, you can have a container full of perlite, have it moist, and it'll hold enough moisture that those roots are going to actually adhere to the perlite, very similar to leca balls. I add perlite to all my mix. When I'm using it for philodendrons, monstera, syngoniums, anthuriums, I actually add like half perlite, like a good chunk of perlite. So I always have that on hand. I rather develop a well-draining mix opposed to a very thick mix to prevent root rot. Okay, the last ingredient that I use is charcoal by E.B. Stone Naturals. This is horticulture charcoal. This isn't charcoal that you use that you're burning from the wood that you buy at the store. But this is what charcoal looks like. I'm sure you know what charcoal looks like. I beg to differ on like burning wood. Say you cut down a tree and you start burning wood and you got charcoal chunks. To me, this horticulture charcoal and that, to me, is the same thing. Because I try to think of like when you're having out in the wild and you're having natural fires. Natural fires actually help plants to grow. But specifically, I just use this for my indoor garden, and I know that it's well draining, that it's a really good ingredient to use for your plants because it has something in it that keeps away bacteria and mold. It just sterilizes and prevents that, so I use it. I don't think there's really a limit to how much you can use. I used to use a little bit, but when I'm planting a monstera or your larger philodendrons, I typically will use a lot more in those mixtures. In a bigger pot, I'll use more charcoal. When I'm using it for like my Hoyas, I add a little bit, and I also do them fine. That helps with the drainage. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. Also be sure to subscribe to my channel if you enjoy watching plant care videos.